Good morning.
Hello!
Another online Sunday school lesson.
About the tabernacle.
Well, yes.
What?
And no, right?
Well,
I don't know if you remember the lesson we did where the tabernacle was kind of taken apart, where they took the Ark of the Covenant out of the tabernacle. Do you remember that?
right.
Mm-hmm. And they used it as a good luck charm
I know.
way back then.
And we had Playmobil people here.
We had Playmobil people, yeah. So today's a little bit different because after that time, the tabernacle was never the same.
Oh. Mm-hmm. I can see it's gone.
It's gone.
We only have the box here.
Yeah, we're going to do a little bit of a review of everything up to that point and then see what's new.
Oh.
Okay?
Right.
So we remember that God led the Israelites out of the wilderness, right? Mm-hmm. And he brought them into the promised land and they started to settle down and build homes, and the tabernacle was left at a place called Shiloh. Do you remember that?
I do.
Good. So there it was at Shiloh, but after they used that Ark of the Covenant, it never actually ended up back in the tabernacle again.
Oh.
It was in different people's homes, and then at one point it was moved to Jerusalem. So it was always separate from the tabernacle, but the people would go to Shiloh, to that place. The tabernacle wasn't in the middle anymore. They would travel to Shiloh and give their offerings and their sacrifices and pray to God at that spot. But we also remember that the Israelites were slowly getting busy with their own lives.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. And they weren't so interested anymore all the time in going to the temple whenever they needed to.
Wow.
Yeah. And so eventually they started to even want a king like the other nations around them.
So a king was more important than the temple?
Sort of. It became more important than the temple, that's right. And God really wanted to be their king, but since they kept asking him for one, he gave them kings.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. And so the second king of the Israelites, you might remember his name.
Oh, I do.
What?
David.
Yes.
King David.
King David.
Oh, I know.
Exactly, yeah. So David was king of the Israelites, and he spent a lot of time helping them fight their enemies. And so there was a lot of war that went on, and he fought those enemies. And eventually, there came a time where there was rest. No more war. And during that time, David started to think, I live here in this great big palace, and God lives in a tent.
Oh.
Yeah, he thought that was really not fair. And so God was important to David, and he wanted to make sure that the people thought so too, and he wanted to build a temple for God. Instead of the tabernacle, like a tent, he wanted to build a big, beautiful temple.
Like a house.
Like a house, exactly. And so God actually said no to David.
What?
Yes, he did. He wanted to say no to David. Let's have a look inside our box here.
Oh, I'm so excited.
It makes a little bit of noise today.
Oh, what is that?
Let's see.
Can
Let's
you help
open
me?
it up. Sure. Ready?
Yeah.
Open the box.
Wow!
What's in there?
Looks like marbles.
Marbles.
Yeah.
That's right. Marbles.
Wow, they are shiny.
They're shiny. And
Really nice.
cool.
Oh, and they feel so good.
They're
Woo!
soft. Smooth,
Soft. Well, not soft, but smooth.
Smooth,
Yeah, that's what it is.
exactly. So those marbles are just to help us to remember that this was not a tent anymore. This was a building made of marble.
Wow.
Yeah, not these are glass, right? But marble is a big, heavy stone.
Right.
And it's white, and it's beautiful, and it's clean. And so David started to collect things to build this temple that God said he couldn't build. But God did promise David that one of his sons would build a temple for him.
Whoa.
So Solomon was the next king of Israel. And Solomon was the one that was able to build this temple for God. And so it was a really special thing. We're going to read about it a little bit today. But he was allowed to do this, and he started building this wonderful temple for God and for the Israelites to be able to meet with him there. And Solomon hired thousands of workers. There are many chapters in the Bible that talk about this temple that was built. And so Solomon hired thousands of workers. He hired the best builder he knew. And they used the best materials available. And they actually even carved the blocks of marble at the quarry so that when they brought them to the temple, there was no noise.
Wow.
You've been on a building site before, maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah?
They hammer and it's loud and it's dusty.
It's kind of exciting, right?
Yeah.
This would have been exciting, but it would have been pretty quiet.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Wow.
They did all the loud work in other places. And you can read in 1 Kings 7:41 and on that it took 7 years.
7 years to build a temple?
That's right. A
Wow.
long time. But it was beautiful, and beautiful things take time. So when it was finally finished, there were 2 tall pillars. We've got some pictures on our computer. Let's have a look at these pictures.
Yeah.
2 tall pillars in front of the temple. This is a cutout of it. So you can see there's one pillar here, and the inside was all covered with gold.
Wow.
And then there was this laver. Remember the laver? Well,
Right.
this was one big, they called it the sea. And it's on the backs of 12 statues of oxen.
12.
And a huge
Man.
bronze altar here for the offerings. And see that little man? That's
He's
how big everything
tiny.
was.
Really tiny.
Yeah, and then all of this stuff covered with gold. And we have another picture of how big the courtyard area and
Oh
everything
my
would have been.
goodness.
So that was the tabernacle here. And then here we have the courtyard where everybody could come. And here's some more of the courtyard. And everybody could come in there. The outer court and the inner court. And there were not just one menorah. There were 10 menorahs.
Wow. It's like a super big tabernacle.
Amazing.
In stone.
Yes. And there were apparently 400 carved fruits.
Wow.
That's a lot of
It is.
carvings of fruit. And it was just an amazing, beautiful place. And so we're going to look into 1 Kings chapter 8. We're going to look at that, what kind of happened on this special day when they finished the tabernacle, when they finished all the building and wanted to put the furniture in. So
Okay.
chapter 8, verses 1 to 4, we're going to read those together. Chapter 8 of 1 Kings, verses 1 to 4. Solomon then summoned the leaders of all the tribes and families of Israel to assemble in Jerusalem. They were to bring the Ark of the Lord's covenant from its location in the city of David, also known as Zion, to its new place in the temple. They all assembled before the king at the annual festival of shelters in early autumn. When all the leaders of Israel arrived, the priest picked up the ark. Then the priests and the Levites took the ark of the Lord along with the tabernacle and all its sacred utensils and carried them up to the temple. So there we can see that the tabernacle kind of came together again. Did you hear that?
Right.
Yes. So they brought the ark from its one place, and they brought the tabernacle and all the pieces from Shiloh, and they brought them together now in this temple.
Wow.
Yeah, it's amazing. Then it also says, let's look again, that the priests carried the Ark of the Covenant into the inner sanctuary in the temple. And then we're going to look at verses 10 and 11 of chapter 8, the same chapter, and see what happened when everything was together. It says, as the priests came out of the inner sanctuary, a cloud filled the temple of the Lord. The priests could not continue their work because the glorious presence of the Lord filled the temple.
Wow.
Amazing, eh?
That's something.
That is something. And all the people that were there would not have seen that happen before. That was something really new for them because 400 years before, none of them would have been alive. But that's when God's presence in the cloud filled the tabernacle. So now God's presence is doing the same thing. It filled the temple.
Wow.
You saw those pictures?
Right.
That would have been a big, thick cloud if the
Wow.
priests couldn't even stand there.
Right.
Amazing.
It is.
So, let me just find my spot here. That there was a great big ceremony then, right? This big ceremony. It lasted 2 weeks long. and this big cloud that filled everything, and the people would have just been having a wonderful time. And there would have been lots of speeches and festivities and things happening in the city. And on one day, Solomon offered a very special and important prayer to God in the temple.
Whoa.
And everyone would have stood and listened and heard. And Solomon thanked God, and he also asked God for his presence and his protection for the people. And he asked God for his forgiveness and many other things. And I want to look at just a few parts of Solomon's prayer in the temple on this special day. And that's also found in 1 Kings 8. We're going to look in verses 27 to 30. So grab your Bibles again and turn to in chapter 8, verses 27 to 30. Solomon prayed, "But will God really live on earth? Why, even the highest heavens cannot contain you. How much less this temple that I have built? Listen to my prayer and my request, O Lord, my God. Hear the cry and the prayer that your servant is making to you today. May you watch over this temple both day and night, this place where you have said you would put your name. May you always hear the prayers I make towards this place. May you hear the humble and earnest requests from me and your people Israel when we pray toward this place. Yes, hear us from heaven, where you live and where you hear. Forgive." So we can see there that Solomon knew that God didn't need a place on earth to dwell, right? No. And he also knew that he could pray to God and all the people could pray to God.
Right.
And so the temple was only supposed to be a place where the people could be reminded of who God was and how much he wanted to have a relationship with his people. And so without God, the temple was really nothing.
Just a building.
Just a big, beautiful building.
Right.
So later in 1 Kings 8:41 to 43, Solomon says that he knew that God wanted all of the people of the world. He didn't want just Israel. God wanted all the people of the world to come. Let's read those verses. So 1 Kings 8:41 to 43 is another part of Solomon's prayer. He prays, "And when foreigners hear of you and come from distant lands to worship your great name, for they will hear of you and of your mighty miracles and your power, and when they pray towards this temple, then hear from heaven where you live and grant what they ask of you. Then all the people of the earth will come to know and fear you, just as your own people Israel do. They too will know that this temple I have built bears your name."
Wow. It's for everyone.
It's for everyone.
That's good.
So God wanted all people to come and love and worship him in the temple. And he wanted to have a relationship with them, right? So everyone everywhere would one day hear about this temple and the God of the universe and want to come near him. So after this 14-day celebration and all the prayers and things, Solomon sent the people home. And then they were joyful and glad, and they were able to celebrate with their families for one more day.
I would love that.
Yeah. Better than summer holidays, I think.
Oh, yeah.
And then after this time, God appeared to Solomon himself. And he wanted to tell him that if any of his sons or himself turned away from God, then God would actually take the Israelites away from their land.
Oh.
And he would destroy the temple.
Oh, no.
So God really wanted to make sure that Solomon understood that without God, the temple was nothing.
Just a building.
Just a building. Okay? So this is why it's so important for us to know that God is more interested in a relationship than a building.
Right.
And since God is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow, what does this story teach us today?
Well, that's a good question. Because there's no temple anymore.
That's right. There's no temple anymore.
There's no tabernacle anymore.
No, and many of us are those people from the other nations. We're not Israelites.
You're right. Wow.
So if we've been invited to come and find God and there's no temple, what are we to do?
That's a good question.
Let's look again. We're going to look into the New Testament this time. So flip in your Bibles. Sometimes hard to find, but to 1 Peter, the book of 1 Peter chapter 2. Let's see what it tells us there. 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 4, 6, 9, and 10 we'll read. So verse 4 says, "Come to Christ, who is the living cornerstone of God's temple. He was rejected by the people, but he is precious to God who chose him." And verse 6 says, "As the scriptures express it, I am placing a stone in Jerusalem, a chosen cornerstone, and anyone who believes in him will never be disappointed." And verses 9 and 10, "But you are not like that, for you are a chosen people. You are a kingdom of priests, God's holy nation, his very own possession. This is so that you can show others the goodness of God, for he called you out of the darkness into his wonderful light. Once you were not a people, now you are the people of God. Once you received none of God's mercy, and now you have received his mercy."
Whoa.
Cool, Hayes?
It is.
So that's, now we can see that Jesus is the one that we can come to, right?
Right.
And he is the cornerstone of the temple. And without a cornerstone, a building can't stand.
No.
It's the most important piece. So that's Jesus. And so he's that one that he was crucified and he died and he was buried in Jerusalem.
Right.
That's the place where God had the temple at the very beginning, right? And then Jesus did that not just for the Israelites, right? He did it for us too, so that we can come individually as people and as a whole nation. We can come and worship him and be made like living stones to be built up into some place for him to live on earth.
And one nation.
And one nation.
Out of all the other nations.
That's right.
That's amazing.
Yeah, that's right.
Wow.
Made up of all different people from all over the place.
Right. So it's not a place, it's a person.
It's a person. It's Jesus.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's good news.
That is good news. So maybe you can share that news with each other and with friends when you meet them on the street, right? Get together and play. So thanks for watching.
Right.
And we'll hope to see you again next week.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye.